very warm welcome to all our participants in today's webinar. This is our 49th webinar in our talk series. A special welcome to our speaker, Shri Krishnapani K.C. Raju, for making the time to be with us here today. I know it's extremely cold out there, but thank you so much for waking up early and being with us, Krishnapani ji. Before we introduce our speaker today, and for those who were not there earlier and have joined us today, Rutambra Wellness is a collective of like-minded individuals that look at wellness in a holistic way, not just the body, but the mind as well, and all through the practice of knowledge and wisdom that comes from our ancient Indian scriptures and heritage. We conduct corporate programs and retreats for wellness that look at personal transformation and tapping into oneself to unlock our infinite potential. Presently, we're conducting these programs virtually, and our virtual corporate programs are uploaded on our website, rutambrawellness.com. Do visit our website and go through the details of our programs. We also conduct webinars regularly on topics that delve into self-discovery, personal transformation, health, harmony, and holistic well-being, as well as the arts, which help us connect with our higher selves. All our earlier talks are uploaded on YouTube under Rutambra Wellness. If you'd like to be part of our community, the details of where you can connect with us are posted on the chat. Alternately, please post your contact details, cell number, email ID, so we can add you to our groups. So let's get on with today's program. Shri Krishnapani K.C. Raju, who will be talking to us. He's here today and he'll be talking to us on the S model, something that he's developed himself. So thank you so much, Krishnapani ji. And today's session will be 45 minutes of talk and followed by 15 minutes of Q&A. It's rather a long topic, as I understand from my talk with Krishnapani ji. So in case we are not able to finish it in this one session, we will carry it forward to another session. A request for all of you to stay muted through the talk. Feel free to post your questions on the chat function, and Krishnapani ji will answer any question in the realm of well-being. A little bit about Krishnapani ji. He drives the spiritual direction at Rutambra and modernizing ancient scripture to make it contextual to today's living. Krishnapani K.C. Raju is the program director and chief faculty at Rutambra. He has 40 years of experience in industry and academia. Study and research in ancient Indian philosophical and spiritual literature are his passion. He's a keen student of Vedanta, Theosophy, and Jiddu Krishnamurti's teachings. So thank you so much, Krishnapani ji. Thank you so much for being here. And we look forward to the S model, the yoga of transcendence. Thank you. Over to you.
Thank you so much, Beena ji, for those kind words. We will be discussing what I have called it as the S model. I'll let you know what exactly the S means after during the course of my discussion. This is something which I have the seed of this particular model. It was, I was going through my notes and I found that it was on 16th March 2016 that I made some very brief notes on this model, and later on have been working for quite some time on and off. And over the past 1 month, I was looking into this and trying to crystallize the model. And maybe there is still a lot of scope for improvement and other things, but the basic idea which I want to present, I have been able to put it in a PowerPoint, which I'll be sharing with you. And this time I did some experimentation with animation also, and hope you'll be able to actually enjoy what I'm discussing. It's basically the seriousness with which we approach life is the core of the subject, and also about integration. See, the main thrust of connecting to the core is an integrated approach to it, drawing together all our energies and then not allowing it to be totally, disintegrated and scattered. Because that's what normally the way in which the human mind functions. It is operating in a very limited sphere or field. And at the same time, it is also unable to look at the whole thing in perspective, a holistic view of it, and it's always fragmented. So this process in one way has to be reversed, where the limited, the partial, and the fragmented has to become, what I would say as the unlimited, the totality of it, a kind of a total view of it, and also integrate the whole thing. So without much further delay, I would like to just share the screen. Binaji, just give me a thumbs up if you are able to see the screen.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. So, yes. This is the S model. I've called it as the yoga of transcendence. And also I have given this tagline of an integral approach to radical transformation. So let me start with it. You're seeing a blank screen now. I have drawn the x-axis of it. See, very interestingly, in management schools and people who are into the teaching of management, they consider that unless you have a model, you have developed a model, you are not really into it. Each one needs to have a model identified with himself so that he has something to show and say that we have a model. So in a lighter vein, I also thought that I should develop a model. Okay. But as I said, the seriousness of it lies in how we look at the whole thing. Now you have the x-axis, which I am calling it as the axis of action. On the right side, you have the movement of the x-axis on the right is what we are calling it as the action. Then you have the y-axis. This y-axis, what does it represent? It represents what I'm calling as responsibility. And you can see that you have the 4 quadrants, and I have put the action part of it on the lower quadrant on the right side. And obviously the kind of action which we are talking is right action. It's the x-axis moving towards the right represents right action. And by definition, what is moving on the left side, I'm calling it as the wrong action part of it. The 2 most important dimensions for our life are responsibility and action. The other way to define responsibility is what we call in the ancient tradition is dharma. See, dharma has got several meanings to it. Like we have discussed earlier in some other context and said it is about upholding, sustaining and nourishing the whole of creation, the whole of manifestation. But how do you do it? That's where the responsibility part comes. we take responsibility to uphold, to sustain, and to nourish life in all forms. So that is the dharma part of it. And action, the translation of action in Sanskrit, or the Sanskrit term for action, is karma. So this is a model which is talking about dharma and karma. So you have the right action here and the wrong action on the other side. And the top direction of the y-axis is the responsibility. And obviously the downward direction is what we call as irresponsibility or adharma. So this is the structure in which I'll be discussing several aspects relating to dharma and karma. Then, when it comes to the top two quadrants, the quadrant on the top left-hand side, I am calling that as not wrong action, but there is a choiceful action. That means you are performing an action out of choice. The choice, in a way, implies a level of ignorance or a level of indecision or a level of personal involvement. See, when do you have a choice? When you do not know what exactly to do or what exactly to choose from. If you have 4 or 5 options, then you are going to choose one of them based on several factors. And one of the important factors that is mentioned is there's a level of ignorance or limitation which provides us with choice. Choice normally is misinterpreted in some of the mundane understanding of the thing as though it is a question of freedom. It's as though you have a freedom to choose. But actually, freedom to choose is an oxymoron, is a contradiction in terms, because when you know what is right, there's no question of choice. There's no question of any option as such. There's only one option which we would call as the right option. All other options have several dimensions of that limitation or that ignorance that goes with it. So therefore, this is what we're calling it as choiceful action. And the corresponding thing on the right side is what we are calling as choiceless action. So you have no choice. You have only one aspect of it, which is the right responsibility and right action. You do not have any ambiguity, you do not have any hesitation. There's no element of doubt or difficulty in choosing. And there's only one choice. You don't have too many choices there. You have not even two choices as such, because there's only the right action and right responsibility. So this is the matrix that is created. Then we'll get into each of these quadrants. Now, this quadrant on the left side down is what is I have depicted it as the black, because it is representing irresponsibility and wrong action. This is the dimension of it. And I have represented it with the color black. Then this is what we are calling as the demoniac nature or the asuri nature. The 16th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita talks elaborately about the Daivi Sampatti and the Asuri Sampatti. What constitutes divine nature and what constitutes the demoniac nature. So we'll not go much into it, but basically, to put it very simply, it means irresponsibility and wrong action together create what we are calling as this demoniac nature. Then the other one, it is right action to a certain extent, but still irresponsibility is there. This is what we are calling it as the human nature. We have not understood our dharma, and there is a great propensity towards adharma, towards a sense of irresponsibility, where we are trying to, the element of personal enjoyment, the element of personal aggrandizement, acquisition, possession, and all these things represent the aspect of irresponsibility in human nature. though he has a propensity towards right action. He wants to do the right kind of things. I see the majority of the population, majority of human beings have this tendency to be inclined towards the right action. Otherwise, there won't be any society, there won't be any of these things around us, because generally we would like to follow a pattern, conform to what is considered from the societal point of view or collective living point of view as the right action. Okay. Now, the third one is much more wide. And here, this is what we call as the divine nature. So this represents responsibility and at the same time, action with choice. You have an element of choice in that, and you select that based on the available options. You have the action of choice. Here also there is this element of the what we call as the dominance of the self, the presence of the I part of it. That means I am virtuous, I am divine, and I have that element of divine nature in me. Is the recognition of that factor is what makes it to have several options, because wherever this element of the self comes, it's always looking for choices. So that is what we are calling it as the divine nature. And the fourth quadrant is something which is radiant. And this is what we are calling it as the uh, absolute aspects of dharma and karma, which is total responsibility and choiceless action. And this is what we represent as the supreme being. So you have the demoniac nature, the human nature, the divine nature, and the presence of the supreme being, which is transcending all these three aspects of it. Now, I'd like to go into each one of them very carefully, and let us look at it from our point of view. Now, when it comes to human nature, we are thinking beings. Human beings are considered to be thinking beings. Thinking in the sense we are thoughtful and we live in our mind. The mind is the dominant factor and we live in our minds. And thought is an important thing for our sustenance, for our survival, for our evolution, for our growth. So that is the predominant aspect of the human nature. It is thoughtful. Okay. Then when it comes to the demoniac nature, it is thoughtless. There's no thinking as we understand. It is only impulsive. It's doing action. You know, whatever you want, you do it. That's all. You don't care anything about the consequences of it, and then you don't think it through and see whether it is whether I should do such an action or not. So all thoughtless action would be the wrong action, and it flows out of irresponsibility. Then the other aspect of the human nature is that it is compulsive. Compulsive in the sense we are driven by the twin aspect of thought and desire. If we examine very carefully our own thoughts and our desires, we find that these two are very closely connected with each other. Every thought has a desire as its basis. That means you're motivated by some aspect of it. You want something out of it. So every thought is associated with a desire, and every desire prompts one to a thought which leads to further action. So this is something which is compulsive in the human nature. And why I call it as compulsive also is there is another dimension to it. Most of us in our ordinary life feel that we are being driven by something. We are not. We are in some way helpless. Helpless in the sense the circumstances, the situations, the conditions in which we live, the conditions in which we survive, and how we operate. All these things are the driving forces, and we seem to have very little choice in several things, because we are all conditioned by that aspect of it, because you are in a given situation and you need to survive. I see you, we have a family, we have a job, we have some business, we have some activity. So, and this is something which is dependent on several factors outside us. So the outside factors appear to be driving us, and therefore it appears to be compulsive. But when it comes to the demoniac nature, it is impulsive. There's an impulse in you, and then you do it. There's nothing else to think about. There is some strong driving force, and it has to find expression. So that action which flows out of an impulse is what we are calling as impulsive action. In the Ramayana, in the Sundarakanda, when Ravana is addressing Sita, he very clearly says that the nature of a Rakshasa is to grab and possess whatever he wants. That's all. So I am not doing anything adharma. From his point of view, he says, I am not doing anything which is not the dharma of a Rakshasa. The dharma of a Rakshasa is to grab, take possession of it, enjoy it. I want it, I take it. That's all. I don't see whether it belongs to me or not, it doesn't belong to me, or whether it is right or wrong. And therefore, that is my nature. That is my very nature, and therefore I grab it. So the whole action is impulsive, and it flows from that. Then the third aspect which we come to is that all human nature, at the background of it, there is this element of fear. Not fear of something as such, but fear as an element on account of uncertainty, on account of the unpredictability of the future. So these are the two things which drive us. As they say, fear is a very important element for the human nature, which has helped us in evolution also. How we have been able to come to this stage is on account of somehow overcoming the fear and making things more certain and more predictable for us. All human development, if you see, is driven by these things, that things should be certain, more and more certain. Things should be more and more predictable. Otherwise, things become difficult. And there should be some kind of a consistency which is operating. So the aspect of fear is something which is very important. Even for all living beings also, fear is a very important thing. That's why they say ahara nidra bhayamaithunam cha. It is food, sleep, procreation, and fear. These are the four aspects which drive every living being. They need nourishment. They need rest. They need to engage in procreation, creating more and more beings like themselves. Then the fourth aspect is fear. The fear is given a very important place. And in fact, what is the nature of that ultimate reality? The nature of ultimate reality is also defined in terms of fearlessness. One of the at the end of the most oldest and the biggest Upanishad, which is the Brihadaranyaka Upanishad, he says it is abhayam, abhayam, abhayam. He talks about the supreme nature, or the truth about the ultimate reality is that we are in a state of fearlessness. So that's fear is one element which occupies a large space in our consciousness, and all our actions are driven by this, And as I said, fear, it does not mean, I'm not talking about physical fear or emotional fear, which are also there. Somebody is afraid of spiders, or somebody is afraid of cockroaches. That's one aspect of it. That's only the very primitive and basic aspect of it. When I talk about fear, I talk about these two aspects of uncertainty and unpredictability and inconsistency of things. So that's how it operates. And thoughtful, compulsive, and fearful. These are the three elements as far as the human nature is concerned. And coming to the demoniac nature, we have seen that it is thoughtless, impulsive, and because it is driven by irresponsibility and wrong action, we call it as sinful. We call it as something which is not to be done, which is which is not acceptable. This is not acceptable. So it is something which is contrary to all social norms, all the aspects of a collective living. So that's what we call it as sinful. So thoughtless, impulsive, and sinful is what defines the demoniac nature. Thoughtful, compulsive, and fearful is what defines the human nature. Now let us see from the point of view of divine nature. What is it? The divine nature is essentially sinless. The divine nature is sinless. That means there's a great element of purity in it, a great element of what responsibility is there, and you are performing an action which is not driven by your impulses or your mere sense of possession and enjoyment. So the divine nature is primarily defined as something which is sinless. Now, the other aspect of the supreme being which we are talking about is it's attributeless. None of these attributes of sin or fear or being free of sin, they can be attributed to the supreme being. You cannot attribute anything to it. Therefore, it is attributeless. Then the other element, let us see. Divine nature has another aspect of it which is called as ephemeral. Ephemeral is passing. Why we call it as passing is that generally the divine nature is something we ascribe to the heaven, where it is very happy, very enjoyable. You have everything at hand, everything is available for you, and you are in a most comfortable position as you can imagine about it. But the scriptures have repeatedly said that when you're talking about heaven, it is something which is passing. However long the duration may be, still that state of uh, divinity, or what we call as the heaven part of it, is ephemeral and passing, and you have to come back. The Bhagavad Gita also very clearly mentions that the Vedas say that if you are performing some rituals, some ceremonies or yajnas, sacrifices, in order to attain to heaven, you will attain to that heaven through your merit or through your virtue, which is called as punya. Once that merit and the virtue exhausts, once that is exhausted, you are back into the ordinary life again. You are back into the human nature again. So the cycle of birth and death may take you to a certain level of consciousness, a state of consciousness in which you are blissful, happy, you are comfortable. But still, it is something which is passing, and therefore it is ephemeral in nature. It is not something permanent. You need to come back from that state, because it is only something which is attained on account of one's own merits, or what we call as the sinless nature of it, or what is referred to in the scriptures as the punya part of it. The papa part of it is the sinful part of it, and therefore it will take you to the demoniac nature, or what we generally call it as the hell part of it. See, these are only states of consciousness. These are not worlds as we understand as objective worlds. These are subjective locus. This is where we function consciously at different levels. And then when it comes to the fourth, the topmost quadrant, it is eternal. As against ephemeral, it is eternal. So this is something which is timeless in nature. The time element does not enter into this arena at all. In this field, there is no question of time dimension as we understand down below here. In all the other three aspects of it, you see that there is this element of time, whereas the Supreme Being is attributeless and eternal, and no aspect of time enters into it. Then, as I said, mentioned about the divine nature, is it is enjoyful. You enjoy things there. You are there. The I element of it is very strong, and you are there, and you know that you are in a state which is enjoying. You are enjoying yourself. You have all the you created for yourself all the comforts that are required, and how you need to enjoy those things, having acquired lot of merit. So this is the nature, and as compared to this enjoyful nature, here it is blissful. Now, do we see the combination of these things? I'll just repeat it, and then you're able to see it also, that the human nature is composed of these three aspects of being thoughtful, or thought being the primary aspect of it. Our actions, or the forces around us are compulsive in nature, and the two elements of uncertainty and unpredictability, and therefore the element of fear is there. When it comes to the demoniac nature, it is thoughtless, impulsive, and sinful. The divine nature, when we talk about that divine nature, it is enjoyful, ephemeral, and sinless. And the Supreme Being, the nature of that supreme intelligence, is blissful, eternal, and attributeless. This is the aspect of the four aspects which I am trying to talk about. Okay, then we'll go to the next one. What drives our demoniac nature? What exactly is the basis of the demoniac nature in us? It's primarily ignorance. Primarily ignorance, total ignorance about dharma, total ignorance about action. Both dharma and karma are totally misunderstood, and they have no concept about it, and therefore it flows out of ignorance. This is what is the basis for the demoniac nature. Now, what is the basis for human nature? If we do some basic analysis as to how human nature operates, it operates through incompetence. Not that there is no element of ignorance, there is an element of ignorance. Here I am trying to only project what is the predominant factor. It also means that the other aspects are there, but what dominates our life is this sense of incompetence when it comes to human nature. We always fall short of doing the right kind of thing. Okay, or we have the problem of irresponsibility dominating us, even though we do not want to, we want to do the right thing, we are still dominated by incompetence. Incompetence, if you see, is an important element, because here we always find that there is scope for improvement. There's always a scope for improvement, developing your competence more and more and more. So at every level, there is a limitation, which is basically one of incompetence. Okay. Then when it comes to the divine nature, it is what we call as innocence. Innocence is that aspect of the human nature, or what I'm putting it under the divine nature, is that you are free from the aspects of being driven by ignorance and incompetence. You are you are in a state of quietude, you are happy, you are unconcerned about things, and you have so many aspects to it where there is no dominance of of fear or sin. When you are sinless, that is the state of innocence which we talk about. The scriptures talk about this state of innocence also. And if you see the famous quotation ascribed to the Bible is that unless you become like a child, you cannot enter heaven. So what is the predominant factor of a child? Is his innocence. Nothing attaches to him, and he is unaware of what exactly these two aspects of fear and sin mean. So in that state, we call it as innocence. And what is that element when it comes to the Supreme Being? The Supreme Being, it is illumination. It is light. You see everything in that brilliance, in that glory, in the truth of the matter is known to you. You are no longer confined to anything. And as I said, it is a blissful state. It is a state, eternal, this thing. And you are in this aspect of light. You are functioning in light. That means there is no ambiguity. There is no uncertainty. There is nothing to grope about. There is nothing to which causes delusion, which causes bewilderment, which causes any kind of disturbance in that state. And that is what is illumination. So if you have noticed, all these four terms begin with the letter I: ignorance, incompetence, innocence, and illumination. This is what defines the nature of the four aspects which I am trying to discuss about in this particular model. Then we have the other aspect of it. What is it? What do we call in the ancient scriptural literature calls this ignorance as tamas. Tamas means darkness. Ignorance is signified by the darkness or that guna. Of the three gunas, the demoniac nature is tamasic by nature. Tamas means indolence, inertia, are in a total state of darkness, and therefore it is called as tamas. The human nature is rajasic that way. Rajasic in the sense it is active, it is dynamic in its this thing, and it is action which drives the human beings. You cannot be without doing any action. And rajas also means having a colored vision. You have a all types of colors. You know perception. Your perception is colored. And rajas also means attachment. You're also attached to things. That's where the term raga comes from. The term raga is derived from rajas only. So because of your one's colored vision, because of our own propensities, uh, everything which we see is colored by our own self, and we are obviously attached to things, and that is what is the nature, human nature, which is called as rajas. And you might have already guessed what is this thing of it. The divine nature is what is sattva. Sattva talks about dynamic equilibrium. Sattva talks about a state of vibration in which it is pure, it is unsullied, it is untouched by any of these aspects of darkness, that is tamas or rajas, and its state is a pure being of Sattva. Sattva also means innate capability. The term sattva refers to one's own innate capability. A person who has got this innate capability, a talent which is there, and his ability to be very competent in his action is said to be a person with a dominant feature of sattva. That means there is a lot of sattva in it. That's why they say for any action, for any successful action, sattva is required. Kriya siddhi sattve bhavati. For kriya siddhi, for any action to be truly successful, it happens not because of what are all the facilities that are provided to you, or the instruments you have, or the paraphernalia that is provided to you, but it is the innate capability which is the most important thing for success. So as I said, kriya siddhi sattve bhavati. That is the sattva. Sattva is that innate capability of. When it comes to the Supreme Being, it is Trigunatita. It is beyond these three gunas. It is Sattva, Rajas, Tamas become totally inoperable. They don't operate in this field at all. So that's why he is called as Trigunatita, going beyond the three gunas. One of the important verses in the Bhagavad Gita, Sri Krishna urges Arjuna and says, go beyond the gunas. Go beyond the gunas. Don't be entangled in these gunas. Because they are always acting on us. And that is the dominant factor of Maya. Maya operates through these gunas. So we are urged to go beyond the gunas, because that is the nature of the Supreme Being, which is Trigunatita. It is beyond the three gunas. And that is where the whole thing comes about. That means it is the origin of the other three gunas, but in itself it is unaffected by the gunas. Okay. Now, coming back to this, you see, for a person, or for what we called as the demoniac nature, it is all black. Symbolically and literally also, it is because it is dominated by ignorance and tamas, it is all black to him. There's no illumination at all, no question of seeing things in their right perspective. It is always driven by irresponsibility and wrong action based on thoughtlessness, impulsiveness, and being sinful by nature. So this is what we call it as totally black. As compared to this, the divine nature, it is white. The divine nature we see is pure, innocent, sinless, and dominated by sattva. Now, between this black and white, when it comes to human nature, we have all shades of gray. We have all the shades of gray. Here, we as I said, though there is a propensity for right action, because it is driven by our own personal, selfish, limited, motives, where we cannot see beyond our own nose, we find that all shades of gray are there. So there's a dominance of all varieties, all aspects of it. For a Rakshasa, for an Asura, he is very clear in his own way. For a divine being also, he is very clear in what he wants, what is available to him, what he needs to do. He is also very clear. It's only the human aspect of it where we are not clear about anything. We have no clarity. And that is the requirement that is most important. And some of the participants may remember that this element of clarity, which is sought after by human nature, which is called as prasada. The etymological meaning of prasada is clarity or lucidity. That's what we seek. And from there only the term prasanna also comes in our literature. Prasanna being a person who is clear. You are happy when things are clear to you. You are more at peace with yourself when things are clear to you. So therefore, that is the aspect of it which we require, because there is always too many shades. All shades of gray are there in the human nature. Now, what is the nature of the Supreme Being? Supreme Being is totally transparent. Therefore, the Supreme Being is sometimes symbolically represented by a crystal. And we have the statement in English also which says crystal clear. The crystal clear is something which means it is totally transparent and you can see through it, and it is so beautiful. The crystal is so beautiful, which we call as Phatika. We have a beautiful shloka attributed to Hayagriva, where he is called as Nirmala Sphatika Krutim. His form, if at all you can visualize a form, that form is Nirmala and Sphatika. Nirmala is totally, flawless. No question of any impurity there. And it is Sphatika. Sphatika is this crystal. The nature of that crystal is it's totally clear. It is totally transparent. So this is what dominates us as in the fourth quadrant, where it is totally driven by the right responsibility, and you have no choice. You know what is right. You know what it is, and that is the clarity that is presented here, and therefore I am calling it as transparent, totally transparent. So that is the aspect of it. Then coming to the final dimensions of these things, here the demoniac nature is what is dominated by what I am calling it as unconscious imperfection. It is unconscious imperfection. He doesn't know that he is imperfect. The demoniac nature is something which is totally unconscious about its own imperfection. It is unconscious imperfection. As I mentioned to you about the example of Ravana, he thinks that this is right for him. So there is no ambiguity in his case also, because he thinks what he does is right. He's not even conscious about dharma. He's not even conscious about doing the right action. And it is a state of unconscious imperfection that predominates the demoniac nature. Then what is it when it comes to the human nature? Human nature has got that advantage of being conscious imperfection. We know that we are imperfect. We know that we are dominated by several flaws in us. There are several aspects in us which need to be improved, which need to be modified, which need to be transformed, which need to be, changed in such a way that we move more closer towards what we call as perfection. So the human nature, the predominant element here is that it is conscious imperfection that is there. Then when it comes to the divine nature, it is conscious perfection. There, the divine nature in which we know that we are perfect. The Devas have this aspect of perfection, and they are conscious about their perfection. I am conscious about it, and that I am perfect, a perfect being. But when it comes to the Supreme Being, it is unconscious perfection. There is no sense of the I, the sense of being. It is simply perfect. It is simply perfect. That's all. Because there is no entity which says that I am perfect. There is no entity which can claim that I am perfect. So that is the state of unconscious perfection. So we are moving from a state of unconscious imperfection to conscious imperfection to conscious perfection, and finally to unconscious perfection. Now you see the aspect of it, how it goes about. I think there are, I don't know, some lines are coming on it. I don't know where they are coming from. Uh, I'm not sure how these lines are being drawn here. But anyway, the whole idea is that, as I said, you can see an S now. Can you see an S moving from unconscious imperfection to conscious imperfection to conscious perfection to the supreme being, which is unconscious perfection? So that's why I've called it as the S model. The S model also signifies two other or three factors also. One is the S can be called as the spiritual model, or you can even call that as the supreme intelligence model. But more important, what does this model mean to us? What exactly does this model mean to us? That's much more important for us to visualize. The model may be, yeah, okay, we are able to see all these things. You have mentioned all these things, but how, what is it that really matters to us? What really matters to us is to know that we have all these three natures in us in some form or the other, and we are actually scattered. We have some demoniac nature in us, for some human nature in us, and the divine nature in us. And depending upon circumstances, things, and occasions, or whatever external forces are acting on us, they give a dominance to a particular kind of nature in us. But essentially, we are having a combination of all these three natures. This is where one needs to bring about this idea of yoga. Yoga means integrated, being in a state of integration. That means I need to draw together all the energies and come to a point, come to a tipping point where I am no longer scattered. I am no longer operating in a scattered manner and driven by externalities. So what is important for us to understand from this particular model is how to become more integrated and transcend into a state of supreme being. So we are gathering together all our energies whereby we are able to cross over to that. See, if the predominant aspect is demoniac nature, there is a very little scope of crossing over to the other side of the supreme being, because there is only one central point, which is the 0 point, as we call as the origin, the center point of this particular matrix. So demoniac nature and the supreme being, they are only in contact through one small point. So going through that point becomes difficult. Whereas if you see, the demoniac nature and the human nature is divided by the action element of it. If there is a shift from wrong action to right action, there is a transformation from the demoniac nature to the human nature. And similarly, if there is a transformation from irresponsibility to responsibility, then we are moving more towards the divine nature. And the beauty of the human nature is that we are given an opportunity to transcend to the supreme being, to the state of the supreme being, by simply crossing over towards dharma or responsibility, and our right action becomes choiceless action. What we can, the limited aspect of right action becomes choiceless action. So you see the beauty of it. There is a whole field which is dividing. There's a whole line. You can cross this line at several points. You can cross over from the human nature to that of the supreme being, because there's a whole dimension of action that is available to you. The only thing is we need to orient ourselves towards dharma, towards responsibility, and move upwards. Similarly, from the divine nature to the supreme being also, it is a question of moving from choiceful action to choiceless action. So we have this dimension which says that if we are integrated as a human being and all our energies are brought to a state which is closer to responsibility and right action, there is a possibility of transformation onto the other side. There's a possibility for a radical transformation. If you remember, one of the taglines which I have given is an integral approach to radical transformation. The two important elements required are to become integrated and move in a direction which brings about a radical transformation. That is the most important thing that is required. So you're moving from this one dimension to another dimension. That is, you are moving from conscious imperfection to unconscious perfection. See, obviously, there could be a possibility that we are not in a position to directly transform into that state, but we can always allow the divine nature also in us to flower. So when the divine nature flowers in us, there's an easier and a greater possibility of shifting from the conscious perfection to unconscious perfection also. So the exercise which we need to do is, to what extent am I in each of these dimensions? If I can give say 10 points to the whole thing, now how many points in me reflect this demoniac nature? How many points reflect the human nature, and how many points reflect the divine nature? This is an exercise which one can do. This is a part of the same sadhana which we talk about. So you have to ascribe what is the predominant aspect in certain circumstances, what is the predominant aspect in some other circumstances. So if we are able to give points to ourselves, we are in a position to understand our own nature, deeply understand our own nature, without any ambiguity. We see that there cannot be any, delusion in this, in understanding our own nature. This is not something which we are demonstrating to anybody outside us, but inside. So there is this movement inside which tells us that, yes, I have some features which may appear to be demoniac in nature. I have some features which appear to be divine in nature. And a large part of it is driven by the human nature, because we are what we are. So how do I integrate all these things and come to a state of being where I am in a position to attain what I have called as the radical transformation, and moving into that dimension of that supreme being or that supreme intelligence, which is, as I said, blissful, eternal, attributeless, totally transparent like a crystal. It is beyond the gunas, full of illumination, and totally perfect in all respects. So that is the model. If we have, I thought if we have this in front of us, it would be a as to the direction in which we are moving and the direction in which we need to move. A normal direction, as I said, would be an S direction, moving from the demoniac nature to human nature to divine nature and ultimately to the supreme nature. So as I said, the S represents at one level the reality of our being scattered and the need for integration. And another dimension, it represents the spiritual aspect of it, where there is this need to move more towards the divine nature. And finally, the S represents the supreme intelligence state, which is the, to put it in ordinary parlance, it's what is our goal, which is sometimes called as the mumukshutva, or the urgency and the intensity that is required for radical transformation and move into a state of integrated being. So thank you so much.